Binge the full week ad-free over at patreon.com/inspireddisorder.
What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
Jaws! That's right, I'm talking about the movie from 1975. I'm going to be reviewing the franchise of Jaws. I hadn't seen the original in forever. If I had said 20 years it's been since I've seen it, it might even be longer than that. And also, I don't think I've seen all of the sequels to Jaws, so I'm excited to watch all of them. I know it doesn't end well, but I'm doing franchises now on Fridays, or little mini series, I guess, series of different shows. So starting off with Jaws, first of four movies. Excuse me, 4 movies in the franchise. Very interesting. Obviously, we all know the big dangerous shark. Attacking this little island town, little kind of vacation town, and it's super interesting. So the first part of this film, you're kind of seeing how the community reacts to these shark attacks, and then the second half of the film is you're on this boat trying to catch the shark. In the first part of the film, it's amazing how relevant and how similar it is to how our reality is during this pandemic. You have a government who values money over human life. You have the mayor forcing the sheriff to stay open, even though there's shark attacks on in the areas where people swim. I mean, it's a whole beach community. So they're focused on that revenue. They want, it's summertime, all the kids, all the families are coming to this island to go to the beach and have all their fun in the water. And the government wants to keep it open because they value that money. They need that money coming in, despite people dying. So money over human life, as far as what the government values, very poignant, very prescient, very similar to what's happening in our society, where you go to Florida and they really just don't care. They really do not value human life at all. It's all about the dollar and pretending like life goes on. You also have this kind of nationalist view of the people that live on the island. They call themselves islanders. And the only way you could ever be considered an islander, according to this movie, is if you were born there. Anybody that moves there and lived their whole life there, you're not an islander. You're only an islander if your mom popped you out of her pussy on that island, which I also thought was very interesting, that kind of that toxic view of us and them still exists with our country. And even not only just our country, just being an American, but also in different states, especially if you're somebody from California and you want to move pretty much anywhere, whether it's Oregon, moving to Denver, moving to Texas, moving anywhere. Everywhere that I've considered moving or have moved, there is a very noticeable hatred towards people. I don't know if it's just from California moving to those places or if it's from people from other places moving there, but there is a hatred for people from California moving anywhere. Just very unwelcoming. And it's crazy because California is full of people from everywhere. You live in San Diego, it's all transplants because you have colleges, you have the military out there. It's all transplants. You go to LA, it's everybody coming from everywhere thinking they're going to be a movie star or a model or whatever. I'm sure if you go to up to Silicon Valley, I'm sure you got people from all over thinking they're going to be the next Bill Gates, which it's hilarious. California, welcoming to all people, but if you are from California and you go anywhere, you're treated like shit. So is interesting that Islander moment. It's just so crazy how similar all of those hateful things are still around in our culture. But yeah, I love this movie. Obviously, it's a classic for a reason. You have the amazing score I think he's John Williams, right? Am I saying that right? Please attack me in the comments if I'm wrong. Mixed with Steven Spielberg, you have the detailed shots of Spielberg. So many shots, like, just show the detail of everything going on. It doesn't take long, but instead of most movies that would just show the thing, Spielberg in every situation, and it brings a lot of drama. Like, there's a scene where when they're on the boat and he's trying to tie the kind of tracker to the harpoon gun, along with the float, the bobber, and it's just like, last minute, just barely gets it done in time, but he makes sure to give you that close up shot of, like, hustling to try and get it done. And then also the score, like, the score makes so many of the moments go from terrifying to just whimsical and adventurous. Like, there's most points when they're sailing on the boat, and it's just like da 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 da. It's just like these epic kind of moments of like adventure. And then you have the slow drone of the danger that lurks beneath. Um, and of course, the shark, which they don't show because it was broken throughout production. You only really see it towards the end of the film. There's like one moment in the beginning of the film where it's like off in the distance, you see it kind of turn over when it attacks a kid, which didn't look that great, but it's a really short scene and it's from far away, so it kind of works. And then even when you do see it, there's like a scene where towards the end when they're in the boat and the scientist dude is in the cage and he's being attacked. The Jaws is ramming the cage, opening it up, and there's a scene where you see the shark kind of flailing under the water. That looked real. It looked like they had a real shark. Now, I don't think they did. I don't think they baited a shark and had it like kind of roll and attack. Maybe they did. I don't know if they had any real shark footage in this or not. But there are moments of that shark when it's actually swimming under the water that look, pretty passable. I mean, compared to modern day, the fact that they did practical effects, I mean, they only had practical effects, and everything's done during the daytime. Where, like, now with CGI, they hide bad CGI by setting the scene at night. Like, they could have done so much of this movie by using that kind of cop out, that kind of shortcut, going the easy way instead of just trying to do something good, by doing all these daytime practical effects, which I think more movies should do. I mean, because you can do just even the practical effects that we have now, like the evolution that those artists have gone through over the years doing practical effects for film, and then you clean it up with digital. It's exponentially better than doing everything digital, where so many digital effects just don't have the weight and don't have the realism, and they all kind of look the same. They all kind of look like really good video game footage, and so much of it is done at night. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting. Really interesting. Also, just seeing the mob mentality of when the governments are like, all right, we're going to call all the fishermen, and then all of a sudden you have this like flood of inexperienced people looking for, I mean, the government's looking for the easy solution. All these people are looking for the easy solution. They're like piling into boats that can barely hold them, and they think they're going to somehow catch a giant shark. Like, how are you going to bring a giant shark into your little dinghy? It's insane. And just like the anti-science sentiment of the film, that's still prevalent today. Just so much of Jaws, it's crazy how so much of Jaws you could apply to our current reality and how our government handled the pandemic. I mean, if you were to kind of model it directly after that, you would have had a governor that would have just pretended the shark was fake for the first month of summer. Like, you would have had tons of kids dying and people, and like somehow like the people on the island wouldn't believe that Jaws was even real. You'd have like people saying that like, oh, those are fake kids, those are actor kids that are pretending to die, like they do in reality, our current reality. But yeah, just so good. And then once you're on the boat, it's a really cool dynamic because you have the old grizzled vet who's the ship captain, right? He's has all the experience. You got you got Richard Dreyfuss as this privileged scientist. He comes from money, buys all of the equipment he needs to do the thing, but in that kind of ignorance, and he's able to experiment and try things at the grizzled vet. So you have the kind of rookie that's not afraid to break the rules. You got the grizzled vet that knows better, and then you have the Roy Scheider character, who the cop, the police chief, who is ignorant. He's basically like the audience. He doesn't know anything. He's just there to kind of help. Kind of a doofus, not very good at anything. But then you have, he's kind of adds a temperance between the two extremes, as far as how they plan on handling Jaws. But yeah, it's a good movie. I don't know how, like Jaws 2, they kill Jaws at the end of this one, so I'm assuming there's another shark that comes through in Jaws 2. But yeah, it was cool to see. It was also interesting to see. I mean, the grizzled vet dies. You have Richard Dreyfuss kind of hide. He kind of gets away from the shark in the cage, and that they think he dies in the cage, but he ends up just swimming down and hiding behind some coral or whatever. But then he comes back at the end. It'll be interesting to see who shows up in the sequels. And how they handle the sequels. I know it's not handled well, but I really did enjoy Jaws. It was amazing to revisit such a classic, and just see how well it's done, and how well so much of it holds up. So much of it holds up. And not only holds up, but like comments on the ridiculousness and ignorance that our society is still stuck in. From 1975 to 2021. It's crazy. Almost 50 years. Almost 50 years old. Still a great movie. So check it out. I watched it on HBO Max. But obviously you haven't watched it, rewatch it again. Rewatch it again. It's so good. Jaws.
What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
Jaws 2, the follow-up to the classic film Jaws, which I believe was the first summer blockbuster film. Clearly the studio wanted to cash in on the shark film again. Definitely felt like it was a studio push to just get that money. But it takes place same island. You're back on Amity. You're following Roy Scheider as the chief, or the police officer who's in charge of keeping everybody safe on this island. But you could tell the studio wanted to get more of that teen audience, because they added a ton of teenagers, which you don't really get to know any of them. There's also a ton of scuba divers. It's like two of the things in this movie that they added a ton of. I don't know why, but they added a ton of scuba divers. There's a scene. I mean, the movie starts with two scuba divers being attacked by what seems to be the same Jaws. Now, at the end of Jaws 1, spoilers, he gets his head blown off. Jaws gets his head blown off, but somehow miraculously, I guess, regenerates his skull and just has a scar on the side of his head. So it's the same Jaws, right? I was wondering, like, is this another Jaws? Is it the same Jaws? So I'm assuming it's supposed to be the same Jaws, because half of the Jaws' face is all burnt up and scarred up. So clearly, the end of Jaws 1 was a little bit exaggerated, apparently. So the same Jaws is back. They added a bunch of kids. Instead of there being a lot of shark attacks from people swimming, and they show Jaws a lot in this movie. I mean, there's a lot of things this film does that makes it way worse than the first one. Aside, it has a similar feel. Clearly not the same director as the first one. Clearly not the same writers as the first one. But they had the same setting. You have Roy Scheider back as the chief, as Brody, I think his name is, or something like that. What's his name? Yeah, Brody, which is his last name. It's his last name. But yeah, so he's back. So it has a similar feel. It definitely feels like Jaws 1, which is something that the the last two movies don't necessarily have. But yeah, Jaws 2, a lot of boat attacks. Jaws also is able to attack a helicopter at one point and bring that helicopter down. For whatever reason, I thought the term jumping the shark was a term from Jaws, but it wasn't. It's a term from Happy Days where the Fonz jumps, water skis, and jumps over a shark. But yeah, for whatever reason, I always thought it was Jaws 2. I don't think I actually, after seeing Jaws 2, I think I had, because how it ends, like sound is like there's another scientist that shows up in this one, different scientists, but kind of stupid. Just kind of like, just so much of the writing is horrible in this film. But the thing that she was, very focused on making sure the audience heard was that sound is another way to attract sharks. And earlier in the film, when they were trying to drag the ocean floor to try and find, I forget what they were trying to find there. There's a person. Yeah, a boat got attacked. That's right, and sank. So they were trying to find, I believe, a person, and they brought up a power line that was running across the ocean floor, which comes into play later. But yeah, it's way crazier. This movie could have been good if they had focused. I mean, they wanted to bring teens into this thing. Should have focused the entire film on these teenagers. Show us who they are. Get us to know. I mean, it's also two of Roy Scheider's kids, right? Which are actually kind of the through line throughout the entire franchise, are these kids. But more so in this one, because they are kind of, they don't listen to their father. And like all of these kids, they're all sailboat. They all know how to sail. They all have their own boats. Which is kind of crazy. But if they had written the movie to make it more of just the teens, and then Roy Scheider's like this side character that's around peripherally, but they were trying to add too much. There's a scene where it's like this whole school, after attacks were happening, there's this like a whole thing of this boat full of scuba divers, like 10, 15 scuba divers who are all like swimming at the same time, and only one of them actually sees Jaws and swims straight up to the top and gets the bends, which is it's just like a ridiculous scene. It didn't need to have like 20 scuba divers all at once. It really only needed to be the one or maybe two people. So it's just crazy. It's the same thing with the kids. It didn't have to be like, they could have just focused on the two kids of Roy Scheider, focused on them, get to know them a little bit more, so you're at least invested in them, because there's a scene where it's summertime, so they're all out on their boats, and they pass by this school of scuba divers or whatever that ends up getting attacked. But then they run into Jaws, and they all, it's like a survival thing these kids have to do. But I didn't care. I was rooting for Jaws the whole time. Like, I wanted Jaws to just eat everybody, because the acting was so bad. There's like scenes of like girls screaming into camera multiple times. It's just like, this is like, it's like somebody put elements of a Jaws movie, and then they put it in a blender, and they added crap to it. They're like, oh, let's add a bunch of scuba divers. Let's add just like bad versions, bad quality ingredients of what was in the first one. Let's blend it up and make sure it all gets out. It's almost like watching DC movies, where it's just like in reference to things. Like, it's not really a good movie. They're not really well written. They're not really good at telling a through line story. But it's just like aspects. It's all it relies on the references of the first movie to make you enjoy it. But yeah, if they had just focused on the kids, I would have cared a lot more, because that's kind of how the film, it's similar to the first one, in that like the first half of the film, a lot of it's dealing with the drama of this attack happening, the mayor not wanting to close things down. The Roy Scheider's character Brody has clear PTSD, overreacting at the smallest things, which I didn't mind his performance. I thought, although the fact that he doesn't, after Jaws 1, he doesn't like learn how to drive a boat. Like he would the amount that his PTSD affected his ability to do his job. He shouldn't have been a cop anymore on that island. He should have moved away to somewhere that didn't have water because he is deathly afraid of the water still. He doesn't learn how to drive boats or anything. Like you'd think he would either go one of two ways. He would get the hell out of Amity or he would learn how to be on the water. He would have learned how to be more of, a to do his job, just to do basic things better on a place that requires people to be in water a lot of the time. Just another sign of really bad writing. But the very end, you have all these kids kind of you know cobbled together on their broken boats, kind of tied together, and Roy Scheider is like gonna use sound to attract Jaws and make Jaws bite this giant power cable that it mentioned before. But thankfully, it seemed like compared to the next two films, it seemed like the electricity actually did it. But yeah, it was just a lot of shark. Didn't really care about anybody. Bad writing. Not the greatest. It was nice to see kind of elements of the first one, but it wasn't horrible. It wasn't the worst of the franchise. But I was rooting for Jaws. And there's this scene at the very end where Jaws, and it's just like this nothing scene that doesn't draw attention to itself. But there's a girl that falls into the water towards the end of the film, right? And Jaws is coming after everybody. But she has this giant scar on her side. And so Jaws doesn't attack her, assuming, I guess, because he has a scar. Jaws has a scar on his face, so he has sympathy for humans that have scars too. Kind of a weird thing that happens in the film that really doesn't bring attention to itself, and if you were looking away, you wouldn't notice. But Jaws clearly swims past this girl who has this scar, and it's like you can tell that she's, got trauma as well, but it's never brought up. Nothing's ever really said. But yeah, I didn't care about any of the kids. I wanted them all to die. But yeah, his kids survive. His two kids survive, and they kind of live. They're the life breath of this franchise. But yeah, Jaws 2, not the worst movie, but really not very good. The score, obviously not good. I don't think John Williams did the score in this one. It has none of the amazing things that the directing isn't very good. Just a lot of it's not good. It's kind of a bummer. But yeah, Jaws 2. Check it out. It's on HBO Max right now.
What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
Jaws 3D. This is the third, obviously, film in the Jaws franchise. I read a little bit of behind-the-scenes trivia on the film, and it was initially intended to be a parody film. It was not intended to be an actual sequel, but nobody wanted to be part of it. And somewhere in that, they decided to make it a sequel. Has nothing to do really with the original two Jaws films. Aside from the two main male characters are the grown-up versions of Brody's kids. I think it's like Mike and Chris or something like that. Mike Brody and Sean Brody, the older and younger brother. Mike Brody, played by Dennis Quaid in one of his early roles. He works for a company that some people may know, a company that should not exist anymore, that company being SeaWorld. This movie is very much, feels in a lot of ways like a SeaWorld commercial, like they put a lot of money into it, despite the fact that it's also a lot like Jurassic Park. So if like Jurassic Park was SeaWorld, that's kind of this movie, because it's like, this new thing's opening up. It's this crazy new underwater world, and for whatever reason, they make the main base for the theme park under the water as well. Which, as soon as they mention that it's like, oh, well, I have a feeling something's gonna go wrong with a thing underwater, and it's a Jaws film. But yeah, and it was done for 3D. This was also the highest grossing 3D film up until Spy Kids 3D, which is, so I don't know what, like 20, almost 30 years that it was the number one grossing 3D film, and it's got the 3D residue all over it. It's got a ton of scenes where it's just this thing floating inside the camera. I guess there was a lot of arguments where the initial 3D was just to add depth, but the studio wanted more of the stuff coming at you. So all of that stuff is super noticeable all the times where it's got things flying at you. But just in general, like you have that old style 3D where it's like the color separation. It's not something that like they made a separate 2D version of this film and just didn't have that stuff. It just looks like the thing you're supposed to be focusing on. There's no color separation. Everything, it just doesn't. It has 3D residue all over the place. I think it's supposed to be at like Florida or whatever. They made the shark bigger. It's not, for whatever, it's not the same Jaws, obviously, because the first Jaws, the original Jaws, got his head blown off in the first one, and then somehow regenerated his head and just had a scar on his face, and then was electrocuted to death in the second one. So this is just some other shark. I mean, it's really just some other shark that's supposed to also be apparently a lot larger than the original shark, but still not that big. This movie does all of the things that a lot of current movies do with special effects, is that most of the scenes take place at night, so you don't really have to show good quality whatever. It's interesting that that's a trend. That's one of the trends that caught on from Jaws 3D, or from the Jaws franchise, is that when they went to Jaws 3D and they started using the nighttime, the dark scenes to cover up bad special effects. It's sad that Wonder Woman 2 just came out recently, and that movie, gigantic blockbuster budget, still uses nighttime to cover up bad special effects. It's amazing that films still do that. Most DC films do that. But yeah, it's basically like SeaWorld is Jurassic Park, where it's like, they open up, and it's connected to the ocean, and the gates that connect it to the ocean, a big shark gets in, which I think is also similar in some ways to Deep Blue Sea, if I'm not mistaken. There's kind of a similar, I mean, it's a killer shark, but it's like the shark gets into, I haven't watched Deep Blue Sea in a while, but I think that's more of a scientific research space. I don't think it's like a theme park. But yeah, the shark gets in and causes chaos. Just not good. The acting's not good. There's a scene that really kind of illustrates how horrible this has got to be. The worst. In my opinion, Jaws 3D is by far the worst Jaws of the franchise. But there's this scene early on when the younger brother comes to visit the older brother who's working at SeaWorld, and they go to a bar. They introduce like, oh, this is my girlfriend. They have like another girl for him, but the girls don't mean anything. Obviously, they're just kind of they're just there because you have to have a female thing or whatever. But it's only the men they care about. But there's a scene where it's like the brother. There's this game called Standoff, right? That they play in this bar, and all you seem to be doing is standing in front of another person, and you put your hands on each other and you try to push each other over. That's the game, and if you fall over, then you lose. That's like, they invented this game that is the dumbest thing ever, and they put it in the movie as like a way for the brother to kind of, that's how he breaks the ice with this other chick. It's so dumb. It's like one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. It's like, I don't know. So much of this movie, it's just so bad, and it's sad that Dennis Quaid was part of it. But it is what it's crazy. It's the 3D film of Jaws, right? It wasn't even supposed to be a sequel, but they're like, oh, we got the 3D technology. It's clearly a studio like push to get money. Like, we want to do a shark 3D movie. We'll brand it as this. We can't do a parody. We're gonna make it real. They kept like the through line of the sons, which plays out in the fourth one, Jaws Revenge, is still the sons, but this one, has nothing to do. It's not there. I don't even think they reference where they're from. It's a very loosely tied to it. Um, but yeah, I mean, because it's the movie is a lot like a Jurassic Park type of thing. It's the story of the things going wrong, where the shark ends up. They try to kill the shark. The shark causes damage to the. They have like these underwater viewing tunnels, walkways that take you to the hub, and the hub, that's where the main control center is, underwater, of course. But these long viewing pathways where you can see all the under the water life, just kind of swimming around you, which there's plenty of those in reality. Hotels have them, and there's a lot of I'm sure SeaWorld even has them. But Jaws damages those, and then you see like there's these scenes of all these people. Like all of a sudden, SeaWorld has like a warehouse full of like 40 welders, and they're all trying to re-weld new structural things to replace. So it's like while the park is open, Jaws damages some of the infrastructure, causing it to flood. So you got people stuck in areas that you're going to have to get, like, just all kinds of things start going wrong around the park. And it's just like, it's just so bad. It's so dumb. Like, why wouldn't they just get everybody out? Why are you trying to fix this thing while the park's still open? Doesn't make any sense. But I guess, similar to the first one, it's like, oh, we don't want to close the beaches. But this is just even dumber. This is like dumber than not wanting to close the beach. It ends like there's a scene where Jaws eats one of like there's during the course of the film, there's this nature guy who documents nature, but he also like is really good at hunting, and he wants to hunt this shark. And he's got like grenades, and he's got like big giant like security guys that help him out, and it's like, but he's got like this really he's not like an imposing figure whatsoever, and he's got like this weird like British accent. It's just weird. I don't even know if it's British, but it's a weird accent. It's like, oh, I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna kill it. And I believe it's him that ends up getting eaten. And it's like there's scenes, which probably the only cool thing to come out of this film is there's a shot from inside the mouth of Jaws looking out. That kind of looked cool. But there's a scene from the guy getting eaten, and his arm's still kind of out inside the shark's mouth, like just past his reach is the jaws of the shark. And he's got the grenade in his hand. And the end scene, how they defeat Jaws, is like, I think Dennis Quaid gets like this little stick with a hook on it, and he's able to pull the pin, and then the grenade goes off inside Jaws, and his head blows up. Very much like the very first film, right? Which, if we know anything about the Jaws family lineage, is they're able to regenerate their heads and come back again. But that's not how Jaws comes back in the fourth one. I think the first Jaws only shows up in the first two films, and then in this one, and then the last one, it's just sharks. That kind of, by the last one, which I'll talk about more, it seems like the family's cursed with sharks. But yeah, so they defeat Jaws by blowing up his head again, and of course there's the gratuitous, extremely horrible, extremely cheesy, like 3D explosion of Jaws that happens at the very end, and it's just bad. It's just so bad. It's just so bad. I would have loved to see a parody. Apparently, the parody starts off with the writer of the original film or the book, I forget, being eaten by Jaws in his pool. Like, that's how the movie supposedly starts, and like there's supposed to be like aliens and stuff in it. That would have been really fun to see, like a Jaws parody film, versus what they actually made. But it's crazy. It's insane that SeaWorld is such a big part of it. It seems like they're promoting SeaWorld, even though it shows how horrible. It actually doesn't even show how horrible SeaWorld actually is, which is kind of disturbing. But yeah, it's a really weird film, Jaws 3D. I wouldn't recommend it unless you're in the mood to see, if like you're just curious to see where the franchise goes. But yeah, Jaws 3D, by far the worst of the franchise, came out in 83. Looks horrible, acting's horrible, writing's horrible, Jaws is horrible, the 3D residue of the film is horrible. The premise is interesting. I mean, it's basically Jurassic Park, but it's still like, it's stupid. It's so stupid. So don't check it out. Don't give this movie any attention whatsoever.
What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
Jaws: The Revenge, the final film in the Jaws franchise, released in 1987. This one has who's the actor in here? I'm, of course, right off the bat, just completely Michael Caine. Why is that not showing up anywhere here? Oh, there it is. Michael Caine. The great Michael Caine is in this film. But yeah, the movie starts back in Amity. So, kind of the only of the franchise, the 3D Jaws, is the only one that didn't have any reference to Amity. The only connecting tissue is the fact that the Brody sons are in the Jaws 3D. This one is still focusing on the sons. It's kind of the main through line for the franchise. It is the youngest son is now the police officer. I don't know if he's the chief, probably. Forget that moment. But they're back in Amity. His son's the chief, not afraid of the water like his dad was. His mom is there. I think the dad had, in the movie, passed away, had a heart attack. So it's just the mom by herself with her youngest, and then the oldest is away. He's just like a marine biologist kind of a guy. So you're back in Amity. It's Christmas time when this film starts, and the young Brody, what's his name? Not Michael Brody. Carla Brody. Oh, that's the Sean Brody. The youngest son, the one who was scarred in the second Jaws film where his dad had to save him and electrocute the shark. He becomes the chief, and he's going to take care of some issue with the buoy. And it's a nighttime scene, and he gets attacked. There's a shark attack. It's nighttime. Like everybody's having their Christmas party on land, and the son is being eaten by Jaws, which is a different shark. Is one thing. This movie is kind of as if this family is haunted by the Jaws family. Let's say there's a revenge of the Jaws family sharks against the Brody family, and the son's eaten, and it's a I would say a terrifying scene. One thing that I do not understand is how horribly rated this film is. Because in the pantheon of Jaws films, the 4 Jaws films that are out, the first one's a classic, obviously. I'm going to rank all of these on tomorrow. Or actually, no, I'm not going to rank them all. So I'm just going to talk about them now. I was going to rank them. But this is my second favorite Jaws film. Because, I mean, it's not doing like the second one, Jaws 2. It's just clearly a cash grab. They tried to add more kids to it, but didn't really do a good job. Wasn't very interesting. The third one was just probably the worst of the franchise. But number 2, Jaws: The Revenge. One, it brings you back to Amity. It has the family, the core family. The son gets eaten in the beginning, the youngest son, and I would say terrifying. I'd say it's terrifying that he's out there trying to do this thing and he gets attacked by a shark, which is crazy. So the mom flips out, and the older son moves her to where he's doing his research in the Bahamas. I think it's the Bahamas. But so they're going from an island to an island, basically. But it went from like some island on the East Coast to an island somewhere in the Caribbean Sea, I would imagine. So completely different look, right? So it's a movie that is trying to do the original movie justice by maintaining. I think there's some performances in this film that are just as good as some of the performances in the beginning one. Of course, you're not getting the score, you're not getting the directing that you get with the first one, but I think the fact that it's a different look, not just SeaWorld, but it's like it's an island life, but it's a completely different type of island life. It's a even more relaxed island life. It's, tropical island life. The mom is a great character in this. I mean, this is her movie in a lot of ways. She has great performances. There's like like nightmare scenarios with her that I think are great. The oldest son, who's like this scientist, which would make sense that he would kind of get into that. He would want to learn a lot more. And he's out there with his buddy Jake, and they're trying to do research, and he finds that there's, a shark has come into, like, sharks aren't normally there, and because the water's too warm, which I don't know how plausible that is. But the shark haunts this family. They track them down at this other island, which is fine. I mean, if you're going to have a crazy horror movie premise, the fact that a shark would follow this family to another island isn't crazy. The mom performances are great. The fact that she has this kind of little romantic thing with Michael Caine, and Michael Caine's character is fun. He's, this kind of like self-employed pilot that assumingly does a lot of illegal, plane trips for people to make cash under. So he's just kind of living a life like every day is a vacation for him. And Michael Caine's just a great actor. And the oldest son, there's a scene in this movie that is so much like a Spielberg scene where he's like kind of exhausted, mentally, physically exhausted with this shark thing. He's sitting at the kitchen table, and his daughter is sitting at the kitchen table as well. And he starts realizing that she's mirroring what he does. So he ends up doing, progressively more ridiculous things for her to mirror. And it's just this really, there's these, like, if a movie has a scene with an older person kind of bonding with a younger person over a dinner table. There's a scene on with Midnight Sky that's probably one of the best scenes in that movie. Well, that's a kind of very uneven movie, but the scene in this one, it's great. It's like so much heart. Like, there's more heart in that scene than any other Jaws film except for the first one, and even the first one I don't think has any moments like that. So I enjoyed all of this. I enjoyed the end scene. They definitely show the shark too much, as they do in all of the sequels, but at least they're doing it during the daytime. They're not trying to cover it up by doing nighttime shots, which is something that I appreciated Jaws 2 for doing as well, even though, again, they're showing the shark too much. There's a lot of the Jaws attacking boats in these films, but at least it wasn't trying to hide it by doing it at night. And of course, visually, because they're in a tropical island, visually it's a lot more attractive background. The island itself is more beautiful. The ocean and the sky is beautiful. So visually, this film, I think, is adding a lot. But I think it's trying to change it up, and it brought a story to life with these characters in a way that I think is easily the second best Jaws film. I mean, it gets close. If this had like a score that was better, not necessarily like a ripoff of the first one, but if the score was kind of an active character in this, they introduced a lot of new characters while still maintaining that thread of the Brody family. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It is mind-blowing to me that I believe it's one of the lowest rated of the Jaws franchise, which this compared to Jaws 3D, there's no question. Jaws 3D is just a steaming pile of shit. It's really not good on any level. There's nothing good about that film. Jaws 2, I could see there being an argument just because you have the original guy coming back. You still have that original island. It kind of gets into the island a little bit more, but I don't think it does a very good job. Like, I don't care about any of the characters they added in Jaws 2, where in Jaws the Revenge, the mom gets elevated to a place where I care. You see her struggle dealing with her dad or her husband dying, like just how the Jaws being haunted by these sharks has just completely destroyed her life and her mental place. But then you have her balanced with Michael Caine, which is a fun kind of relationship. You get the son who's kind of doing his own thing, trying to do research and trying to kind of bringing back a little bit more science into the Jaws franchise, while also stepping into his father's shoes when having to take on this monster. And then the finale with the mom kind of stepping up to the plate to take out the shark with the boat is great. I mean, the poster spoils that fact that, like, the poster shows her sailing a boat towards Jaws, and that's literally how Jaws gets got. And even the fact that Jake lives at the end is amazing. There's a fun underwater chase, which, considering like all of these movies have so many scuba divers in them, this one actually has a fun chase where Jaws is chasing Michael Brody underwater, and he goes through some shipwreck stuff to try and get away, and then uses an air canister to shoot him. It's like a really fun chase scene that wasn't done in any of the previous Jaws films. They kind of did something similar in Jaws 3D, but there was nothing good about Jaws 3D. Whereas that was a fun scene. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It is amazingly mind-blowing that it's rated horribly, but will ever be, if I had to rank Jaws films, Jaws 1, Jaws the Revenge, Jaws 2, and then Jaws 3D would be the fourth in line. But yeah, Jaws the Revenge, they're all on HBO Max, or HBO or whatever, if you have the HBO Max app. So revisiting them for sure. But I would definitely revisit Jaws the Revenge. It's surprising how good it is despite how horribly it's rated. And maybe there's things about it that I just overlooked, but after watching Jaws 3D, it's would be really hard for me to really criticize any other Jaws movie for being as horrible as that one is. But yeah, check it out, Jaws the Revenge. I enjoyed it. Get yourself a free subscription to Kindle Unlimited when you go through my link, inspireddisorder.com/Kindle. That's unlimited reading and listening on any device. If you're a fan of stories and books and all of the things that can be printed in Word or read aloud, get yourself a free trial of Kindle Unlimited. Go through my link, inspireddisorder.com/Kindle. Sign up now and enjoy your reading. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on IGTV, YouTube, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Binge the full week ad-free over at patreon.com/inspireddisorder. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. And follow the show on Instagram at Ray Taylor Show. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!